Everybody has a story, whether it's the story of our lives, the story of our heritage, or the stories we tell ourselves about who we are, that we hang our identities on. Our whole world is made up of stories. And it's not just our own stories that define our world. All you have to do is switch on the television or take a walk outside, and whether it's advertising billboards, the television news, the latest soap operas, or the cultural and societal rules and regulations that set out to bring order to the way we live our lives and go about our days, everything is made up of stories. Indeed, even the passing of the seasons is a story that unfolds over and over again right in front of our eyes. As Yuval Noah Harari said, humans think in stories, and we try to make sense of the world by telling stories. This is Conversations on Living, a podcast about learning how to be, how to live, and how to make the most of this one wild and precious life, as Mary Oliver might have put it. I'm Chris Brock, and I hope that you'll be the Dr. Watson to my Sherlock Holmes as we explore the mystery of just how to live and how to live well. This week, we're exploring the power of stories, about how the stories we tell ourselves and others can help us own our lives, unfurling it in front of us like a blossoming lotus flower. Or they can help to keep us trapped and paralysed when they manifest as fear, as unsurpassable obstacles that stand in the way of us and our potential. Today I'm chatting with Kerrin Black, international publicist and founder of Talentfinderscom. We chat about the importance of grabbing on to our stories with both hands, and how, if we can summon up the courage, our stories can propel us towards a greater sense of being, of fulfilment and achievement. You can find out more about Kerrin at www.kerrinblack.com, and she's also running a PR bootcamp for anyone who wants to take their public profile to the next level. To find out more about that, email her at kerrin@talentfinders.com. All of these links will, of course, be in the show notes. And before we get started, just a shout out to the guys at Headliner. Headliner is the service I use to create those waveform graphics with audio snippets that I share on social media to market this podcast. Headliner is really the easiest and most powerful way to create these audiograms, so if you're a host of a podcast, you really should check them out at www.headliner.app. And don't forget, if you enjoy these conversations, please rate, review and subscribe. And don't forget to tell your friends and co-workers and anyone you can find. It all really helps to spread the word. And you can find out about this and all the other episodes of the podcast at conversationsonliving.com, as well as information about me, my writings, my meditations and more. And don't forget to sign up to my very infrequent newsletter while you're there, and you'll also get a copy of my latest book, Shine Manifesto, absolutely free, as a thank you for your troubles. And if you want to carry on the conversation, head over to the Facebook group and join the Convo crew. Just search for Conversations on Living. Now, without any further ado, here's my conversation about owning our stories with publicist Kerrin Black. So, hey, Kerrin, you are a friend of the podcast. You've been on the podcast before. We talked back in the early days before pandemics and things like that, relegated us to Zoom calls and all that kind of stuff. And we met face to face and we had a conversation. And you're back on the podcast to talk to us a little bit about personal PR, about publicity and why it's important, why it can be a little bit scary, and then some of the people you work with and that kind of thing. So maybe you could give us a little bit of background about yourself, what you do, and then also kind of why a bit of personal publicity is important if you're in that kind of professional sphere, if you like.
Yes, thanks so much, Chris, for having me. I'm an international publicist. I've been doing publicity for the last, I'd say over 15 years. Lost count already, but basically, just to give some background, I'm more like on the personal, sharing people's story and the power of people's story, because everybody knows a name and knows like successful brands. So if you take Richard Branson or Elon Musk or Sarah Blakely, and you talk about them, it's really what sells them is their personal story. Everybody knows their brands are great and what they're doing and contributing to the betterment of humanity. But I think really what sells them is their story. So that's really been my drive. And it's not only about working with necessarily famous people, big names. it's also, there's some amazing people doing incredible work, and their stories aren't being told. So I think it's important, and that's been one of the driving factors for me. So yeah, it's the journey really started with one particular South African artist who was living in New York at the time, and I reached out, and I actually just ended up doing publicity by default. So that's really how my journey started. I didn't study or train in that arena, and yeah, just continued to do that. So I don't know if that gives you some idea.
Yeah, I mean, you've mentioned some really interesting people there, and you're so right. I mean, Sarah Blakely, she's the founder of Spanx, isn't she, in America?
Yes,
And
yes,
Spanx is not a product. I'm not exactly the target audience for this product, but it's basically she cut the feet off a pair of tights and
yes,
realized that
exactly.
they kind of smoothed out some of the bumps,
Yes,
and then she was very fortunate to be on the receiving end of the Oprah effect.
yes,
And I remember hearing an interview with her where basically Oprah got in touch and said, we really love your story. We're going to send a film crew over to her offices, over to your offices."
yes,
And she freaked out because her offices were actually her front room. And
yes.
so she had to get all her friends in to pretend that they were her
Accountants
employees. And
and
yeah, and make it all look like she was running a kind of professional operation.
yes,
But then, because of this exposure from Oprah, she went on. Well, and I believe she just sold 51% of Spanx.
yeah, that's right. I think for like $1.2 billion or
Yeah,
something.
and she's now this
Yeah,
kind of crazy billionaire. She went from kind of cutting the feet off tights in her living room to now being a billionaire. And
yeah,
it's that story. And Oprah herself has always talked about the power of your story. And Richard
yes,
Branson is the kind of figurehead of Virgin. And it's this story. And I know some very successful people who also have amazing stories. And I think behind every one of us, we all have a story, don't we? And
yeah, absolutely.
why do you think the story is so important, that personal story?
Because I think that people want to know, well, I certainly am like this, and I guess other people that I've worked with, people really want to know the name and the face because, you know, I think it also becomes like there's a personal connection. And I think also it's also the inspiration to be able to show people what is possible. So, I think for me, I don't know Elon Musk, but because he comes from my country, South Africa, and he went to Pretoria Boys, and he had a very difficult time in South Africa, as did I. And I'm not talking about necessarily poverty or growing up in a dysfunctional family or anything like that, but I think when you come from that kind of environment, it's it builds a lot of character, and it also forces you to be strong in ways that you didn't necessarily know or realize that you had the possibility. I mean, he left. If you've read his book, he left South Africa and then landed in Canada and called his mom and said, "What do I do now?" And look where he is today. And
Yeah.
I've stood outside SpaceX headquarters, and you just stand there and you realize just the magnitude of what he's doing and how he's trying to create something for the betterment of humanity. Whether that's Tesla, SpaceX, the Boring Company, any one of his multiple companies. So I think it's just really having that connection and realizing what's possible.
Do you
And
think
that,
that's what it is? There's something in there that kind of resonates with people, and it's kind of you've got this guy coming from a kind of slightly difficult life in South Africa, and then
yes,
going on to become like this kind of world changing billionaire
bigger.
entrepreneur. Yeah, and
Yeah,
one of my previous episodes of the podcast, I did a double episode all about ultra running,
yes,
and having run a marathon, and it nearly killed me myself, and I did a very slow time. But then I interviewed this guy who's done he goes and runs 100 miles and does 100-kilometer runs, and will do 7 marathons in 7 days across the Sahara Desert and things like this. And it's that next level that most of us would say, oh, it's just not possible.
Yeah.
But these people prove it is possible.
Absolutely.
You know, and I find that quite interesting, and people are drawn to that. People are drawn to Richard Branson. People are drawn to this kind of rags to riches story. That you know, because I think a lot of the time as well. Sorry, I'm rambling on here, but
no, that's fine.
We tend to think that I could never do that. I could never do that.
Yeah.
And then when someone does it, we kind of think, well, maybe I could.
Yes. I think it's just a belief. I mean, I think it's very hard. It has been very hard through the pandemic, but I also think that, you know, you have to be front of people's mind because we have so much information coming at us all the time. You know, like if you look at Coca-Cola doesn't have to advertise, but they still do. You know, I don't know too much about the actual Coke story. I mean, you know, the people involved, like the Warren Buffetts and so on, in terms of investors and that kind of thing. But for me, I just think that, you know, we really need to not only look to people who have done exceptionally well, like the Bransons, but we have to look to people in our own communities, and we have to try to create a unification. And I think that these stories do unify people. Like if you go back to last year when there was all this divisiveness and, you know, political rhetoric and all this nonsense, and yet Elon still managed to launch a rocket into space, and you could see how it unified people. So I think that that's the whole thing, is we need to come to a place where we're unified. And I think the people that are doing amazing things and having their stories told in the media, whether it's TV, radio, podcasts, whatever, it's important for those stories to be told, because people need to resonate with people, if you know, because not everyone's going to be a billionaire, not everyone's going to get to Elon's, you know, there's a very rare percentage that gets to that level. But I think if people in their own communities can share their stories, you know, that will help other people to be inspired to show people within their own communities what's possible, even if it's not at some grand scale.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, I can't remember who said it, but it might have been Brené Brown or someone like that. You know, it's when you kind of talk about your own journey, it encourages other people to talk about their journeys as well. And that can be a very, very powerful, you know, healing tool in a way, and help people to kind of come to terms with the harsh realities of life, or, you know, find their own space in life. But how do we make sure we're not, when we're embarking on this, you know, we've got a message to tell, and we're using our own stories as a medium to tell that, or a business to promote, or whatever it might be. How do we stop this from becoming a kind of big ego trip, and just kind of becoming this kind of bigger than life version of ourselves? How do we rein it in?
Well, I think that it's really about being authentic, and it's about using the platform, because I 100% get what you're saying, because I think that there is a very fine line, and there's also a very high level of narcissism that we see, and I think the pandemic has amplified that. But I think that it's, you know, I guess for me, the people that I've had the opportunity to work with, you know, I think there is, in most of the instances, you know, through people's experience, as through my entrepreneurial experience, there's a certain level of humility that comes with it, through the real pains and traumas of entrepreneurship. And I think that if you can be vulnerable but authentic, without, you know, making it soppy, or without, you know, look at me kind of, because I've never been like that myself. I mean, I was always very, in any media that I've been in, or any magazines, I've always made it about the vision and the journey, and how I would like to improve and change and impact other people's lives. So if you make it about the message and about other people, I think it becomes, it's far more authentic. The message comes across far more authentically. than, oh, I just want to be featured in a publication because,
Yeah.
I want everyone to see what I'm doing.
Because there is, I
And you
mean,
do see that in celebrity. I mean, I don't think celebrity has the same level of influence it does, because I think people can see right through it in
yeah.
terms
And
of transparency.
I think with this kind of this world of kind of Instagram as well, there's this kind of highly
Yes.
polished, perception that the perfect life looks like this, and we're all, hanging on, hanging on the wings of private jets, and going on yachts in the Caribbean, and looking
Yeah.
amazing with our beach bodies and everything.
Yeah.
But to be truly authentic, you need to kind of be a little bit kind of like, I'm not perfect. This is me, warts and all. I
Yeah.
mean, how vulnerable do you have to get in order to kind of tap into that authenticity? I mean, that can be quite frightening, can't it?
Yeah. I mean, I think it can. I've had, my own awful situations of sexual harassment in 2017 and 2018. Um, one with a major company, won't mention their name, but their former co-founder. So I think that it's hard to talk about those things. But I also think that if you're coming from a place of truth, and you're coming from a place of wanting to protect and help other people, I think it is important to show vulnerability through whatever it's been,
Yeah.
whatever adversity, whatever, without playing a victim, but rather standing up in your truth and saying, through my journey, I experienced this, or that thing happened, or these are some of the biggest lessons and learnings, and we all have to go through that. But I think that if you tell the truth authentically, without bashing people, or trying to be vindictive in any way, I think that I think it's important, because you don't know who's listening, and you also don't know who you could be helping.
Yeah.
And there's many women, like the year that it happened to me, there were stories that broke out in San Francisco about how women were being sexually harassed, or tried to be exploited because they were going there to seek money for their businesses, and these men, because Silicon Valley is there's just so much money there, that they think they can just do whatever they want, and they're above the law, they're above whoever. And I've heard some pretty harrowing stories from other women, and I think that it's important to talk about it, because how do you change the narrative if you're not willing to stand in the truth?
That's
So I
true. I
think
mean,
it's important.
yeah, I mean, I've spoken to people, and this can be for any kind of difficult, challenging
Absolutely.
life experience. I've spoken to people who are talking about their journeys through cancer, for example, or
Yeah.
through rehabilitation after brain injuries, and things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, there is that kind of idea that you're putting yourself out there, and you can kind of inspire people to kind of shine their light as well, or encourage people to kind of be brave, and deal with their traumas and the things that have happened to them. But I mean, we mentioned Brené Brown a little while ago, and she said, if you're going to step into the arena, you're going to get a kicking. And
Absolutely.
I mean, anyone in the public eye has the people who love them and the people who hate them, and I think that can be very, very frightening. You hear about people just getting terrible hate from complete strangers, and
Yeah.
all they're doing is just being out there, living a
Yeah.
life that other people are not brave enough to live. So
Yeah.
how do you kind of prepare yourself for whatever industry you're in, whatever message you're sharing, stepping into the light, if you like? How can you prepare yourself for the inevitable negativity you're going to get?
Well, I think firstly you really have to know who you are. I mean, I think in the instance, I'll use the example of myself. I think because you know I didn't really have a voice before, and I thought that, okay, the first time that situation occurred, I never said anything, and then the second time it occurred the following year by somebody completely different, I realized as time went on that, after all, the difficulties and heartache, and just damage that was done, I realized that I have to use my voice. And many people, I cut myself off from a lot of people, not like permanently, but during that period. And I really had the support probably of three people that really knew and understood what was going on. And I realized that I have to use my voice. And people said to me, don't do it because it's going to destroy you. These are big corporations. I'm like, well, it's destroying me anyway. And I realized that I think it takes an immense amount of courage and bravery, and I think that also in a way it's healing. I'm not saying it heals completely, because it's always there lingering in the back of your mind as to what happened and how you could have maybe done things differently. But at the same token, me opening my mouth and me saying what I had to say got the guy removed from the company. And that is not an easy thing to do. And I did it anonymously because I was petrified. I was like, I don't want litigation. I don't come from the US. I'm not a US citizen. All of these things, play a role. So I think that, to answer your question, it's about really digging deep, even no matter how hard it is, because I know that I saved that company millions in future litigation. And I would have felt guilty if I hadn't done it, because I knew that at some point, whoever it happened to next probably would have gone after him and the company, and they would have been millions of dollars in lawsuits. So I really think that it's hard. I'm not saying it's easy, but you really have to dig deep and find your truth and stand up and do what's right. And I think now more and more people are coming forward, even maybe from years of damage where they stayed silent. They're seeing other people come forward. And I think it's because other people are standing up, other people are talking, whatever that may be. Like you say, it could be multiple different scenarios, but they are coming forward and they are talking. And I think that is helping to change and shift the narrative. So, yeah.
But I mean, in terms of, that is quite an extreme. When we talk about stepping into the arenas, that's quite an extreme arena to step into.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people are, in terms of personal publicity and in terms of becoming visible, they're very much scared of what people will think. Even just other people are going to think I'm stupid.
Yeah, for sure.
And people will make you feel stupid. I mean, I'm sure you had personal attacks over the years and things like that.
Sure.
And I mean, anyone does. I mean, you follow any politician, you follow any celebrity. There are people who love them, but there are also people who hate them. And you I guess you have to roll with those punches. You have to kind of disconnect from that a little bit in order to kind of focus on whether it's outing or standing up for people who've been, in abusive situations like you've experienced, or whether it's just telling your story about cutting the feet off tights in order to kind of promote your business or whatever it is. You still need to become visible, and that can be quite terrifying for people.
I mean, it for sure, especially if it's not something you used to. But I think, again, if it's really just about the power of the power of telling your story, and also just going. You have to, I think, just even if it's uncomfortable, because I think that's the whole thing, is if something's uncomfortable to somebody, to people say, oh, you shouldn't do it. But I think that it's totally the opposite. I think you should do it because it is going to help you grow. It is going to help you expand. And I think you just have to get to a place where you are comfortable and at peace, irrespective of the attacks or the compliments. And you just have to, it is hard because, people take things personally. But I think once you realize, we're living in a world where everyone's got an opinion about everything and how you should live your life, and everybody's dictating to everybody else how they should be doing things, instead of, actually just looking at themselves in the mirror and living their life in the best accordance, to the direction, or, to their dreams or inspirations or aspirations. So yeah, I think you just have to really be willing to go, you know what, I'm willing to step into this, and and really just, I guess, self-talk, and just be, surround yourself also with people that are going to support you, so that if something does happen, or somebody does, say something, or especially on social media and things like that, that you can just lean into those people if it gets difficult or tough. But you must remember that a lot of people's opinion, I don't have to tell you, this is based upon their own insecurity
Yeah.
anyway. And they're only saying things of the perspective of their point of view, which is probably very limited anyway. So I think that people just have to, if you want to be in the media and you want to, expand your personal brand and share your story, you just have to be willing to accept that with the good comes the bad, and it's only going to make you stronger. And provided that you just keep consistently doing what you're doing, you shouldn't be paying attention to other people's.
It reminds me of Anais Nin, the writer. She said, um, "I don't see you as you are. I see you as
Yeah,
I am." And
exactly.
people, whatever you're doing, people will relate to you from their own perspective,
Yeah,
and sometimes they can respond to your courage to get up there and speak in front of the world, and
yeah,
that will kind of reflect back on their insecurity about that, and whatever it might be, you
yeah.
will bring that out of people. I um i spoke with one of your colleagues on the podcast a few episodes back, Amy Scruggs,
Yes,
and she is a television presenter. She teaches media skills to professionals,
yeah,
and I spoke to her about, every day we get up and we have to face the world. And,
yeah,
with her in particular, she's been in the public eye ever since she was born. She's a singer. She's, a very uh, outward going person. And I
yeah.
said to her, "Do you ever get afraid? Do you ever get afraid of what are people going to think of me today? What are people, what if I make a mistake? What if it all goes wrong?" And she
Mm,
said, "I do every day. I get that fear. Every day when I wake up, I get that fear,
yeah.
and I have to take ownership of it.
Mm,
Because
absolutely.
that fear is enough to stop anyone in their tracks. I'd love to be a Hollywood actor, but I'm afraid of what people will think of me. I'm
Think.
afraid of being rubbish. I'd love to be
Yeah.
a global athlete, but I'm a terrible. I'm not fit enough. I'm worried that, like, the criticism." And she
Mm.
has techniques. So she meditates. She has mantras and affirmations that she uses. I mean, is there anything that you call upon, or you recommend people call upon, before they step into the light, if you like, and before they kind of submit their article to Forbes magazine, or before they kind of get out there and tell their story?
Yeah, so I think, as examples of some of the things that I do, obviously, I mean, I'm not on TV all the time, but I have done interviews. I have been, on TV and in magazines and so on. And I think that some of the things, like for me, obviously, I do meditate. Um, and because I live close to the ocean, I walk every morning. I was running till I had a foot injury. Which I'm still working to fix. But normally I would run, because I run every morning. But I think that it's just really getting grounded. So whether that's in nature, whether that's taking a walk, whether that's meditating, and just really getting centered, for whatever that environment presents. I mean, obviously, magazine interviews and things are slightly different because either the journalist will send the questions or they'll interview and then they'll write the article. So it's less about being, on a TV screen, or, on a podcast, or, in any sort of public, like mainstream media format. But yeah, I just think that it's just important, just, breathe, meditate, anything that's going to kind of root you back in nature. That's how I certainly look at it, because I think that that really does give you a sense of strength. Um, so those are just some of the recommendations I could make in terms of, if, before going on to any level or any interview, that's what I would be doing.
I read one of Tony Robbins' books, and he talks a
Yeah.
lot about state. and taking ownership of your
Yes.
state. And he, at his home, he has a plunge pool, this icy cold pool that he jumps into every morning just to kind of wake him up and get him energized for the day. And I've seen before he goes on stage, he'll jump on a jump up and down on a tiny trampoline just to kind of get the blood pumping. And
Yeah, get the blood going.
yeah. And it just reminded me of that when you were saying about going for a run in the morning, just something that will, because sometimes when I wake up in the morning, I'm full of self-doubt. I'm full of
Yes.
kind of like, oh, what is the point? I'm not good enough. But then you need to push through that. And I've heard other people say they'll stand in the mirror, in front of the mirror, and make themselves look as big as possible. Other people have affirmations and things like this. But I think it's really good to be able to kind of reset yourself into a kind of positive state and just be able to kind of silence those negative voices.
Yes.
Because otherwise that inner narrative can end up owning you if you're not careful.
No, 100%. And it's the voices in your head that are the worst sometimes.
Yeah, the worst critics.
When you've got to try to, they just have days you feel like, oh, I just want to do my day, like I don't want to get out of bed or whatever, but then you do, and you get up and you do what you have to do to make what you want happen, because no one's going to ultimately do it for you. So I think it's just important to apply whatever techniques work for you, whether that's, like I say, taking a walk or meditating, even if you wake up and you meditate for half an hour before you get out of bed, I listen to a lot of YouTube, and then sometimes at night, if you struggle to sleep, I listen to dolphin meditation, and I never even make it to the end because I just pass out.
Because you've worked on lots of projects, and I've written books and things like that, and I can start a project, but they get halfway through, and I'll be thinking, oh, what is the point? I'm never going to finish this. Yeah. And it's just keeping that momentum going. Did you find that when you were setting up Talent Finders or any of your kind of charitable ventures that you needed to somehow find the motivation to keep that going?
Oh yeah, all the time. Even now, because it is hard. I'm still, for me, trying to find a funder to expand on what I already have. But yeah, it is. It's very challenging, because I think, as you probably know, being an entrepreneur, it's very lonely. Like, you can have all these people and you can know a lot of people and you can hang out with people, or not, with it, meetings or whatever. But the reality is that it always comes back to you. And it is hard. It's hard because whether you're trying to, manage raising funding, or whether you're just managing day to day, and I've always lived by this principle, and I think I said this the last time, is I don't spend what I don't have. I don't have credit. I don't, have all these things that are going to ultimately get me into problems. And I always try to think ahead, in the sense of, I need to prevent a train wreck. So in order for me not to have this train wreck, I need to be able to be having this continual flow of revenue or income or whatever. And you really just have to be focused and disciplined.
Can you use that same thing to kind of preempt your own losing momentum, if you like? Can you sort of say, I know that in a month's time I'm gonna run out of steam for this, so I need to think of ways that I can keep myself buoyed up and keep the faith that it's a worthwhile endeavor?
Yes, 100%. I think you have to, and I'm not saying that it's going to work all the time, because you are going to have low points. You're going to have a lot more difficult points and challenges than you are going to have that are good. But when you hit the good things, whether they're small incremental achievements or whether they're big achievements, you have to acknowledge when you get those, and you have to appreciate it, because I think sometimes we get caught up in a state of, oh, it's the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. But it's funny, like I said to somebody the other day on a call, they were asking, and I was talking about various things, and I said, my discipline for this year was to make sure that I eliminate some of my debts. Well, it's all done now, but in South Africa, related to the business, and I did, but you have to really stay the course, and it isn't easy. I mean, I'm not going to kid anybody. There's days where it's really hard, and it's like, well, what do I do today? But I think, like you say, you can mentally prepare yourself for things down the line to be able to say, okay, how am I going to motivate myself if this thing doesn't quite go according to plan, or whatever. So I think there are ways of doing it, but you also have to be forward thinking in that respect.
Yeah, and I suppose that a level of self-awareness is required. So
Yes.
you need to know that, ultimately the drive to make this happen has to come from me. I can't expect the world to kind of help me along here until this thing is finished and up and running. So I need to keep, like you say, stay the course. So just so we've been talking about Talent Finders. Can you give us a brief overview of what Talentfinders.com is all about?
So Talentfinderscom is an online talent community for people who are in the creative space. So actors, models, musicians, speakers, athletes, directors, photographers, anybody, even entrepreneurs. So it's an online database or online talent community which connects and promotes talent. So those talents looking to get exposure and those looking for talent can come to one central online talent community. And the goal really was to be able to say to people, whether you're represented by an agent or whether you're self-represented, you can still register on the website, because we're not an agency. We're more just a platform for people to be able to be found or to find who represents a specific individual under whatever category or genre. So that was the idea, and then create an education element to be able to help people. So I had people come to me and say, we wish we'd had a platform like this, because when we moved from the UK to LA, we didn't know, like, how do we find an agent? What should our headshot look like? There were all of these factors, and that's what a lot of people don't understand, is the industry doesn't, yes, you have casting calls and you have all these things here, but it doesn't necessarily work the same as the US. So I think that was part of our goal and mission as well, is to create an education element with Talent Finders as well.
So kind of like a LinkedIn for creatives in a way.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, fantastic.
And also I think as well, it's more cost effective for artists, because to have your own website, the majority of people don't maintain or sustain their own websites, or becomes too costly. Whereas with ours, they can pay an annual fee per year, list their profile, go in and update their information anytime they want at no extra cost. So I really think, that was really the purpose, was to make people feel like they weren't being ripped off.
And how long did it take you to get it up and running? What was from getting the idea together and then sitting down to make it happen? Was it a long journey?
Yeah, a long time. I mean, it was 2005 I registered the business, but it was only in 2008 that I actually got the website built. And, we had our own set of challenges, because, again, it's South Africa and we didn't have, PayPal and all these online payment gateways. So at the time we were running off debits, which is very antiquated, but it is what it is. And I mean, South Africa only really got PayPal 5 years ago. So it's obviously we use PayPal now. But we had to go through our own set of teething problems and find an investor so we could rebuild the website to what it is now.
I mean,
we'll probably go through another transition.
Did you ever feel like kind of giving up and just saying, no, I've had enough of this? It's too much like hard work, or, I'm losing the faith here.
I mean, I think there have been moments where I have felt like that, but then I realized, like, Talentfinders.com is really my real estate in terms of my domain. And I really believe that we can do something great. I think, these freemium models are great, but you have problems with fake accounts, you have problems with hacking, you have problems with all of these things. So I really wanted to kind of add value to people in terms of what Talent Finders offers, and make it a unique experience. So yeah.
And in terms of offering people value, and everything you seem to do is about kind of getting people, I keep using this phrase, into the light, if you like.
Yes.
Or getting people to step into the arena and tell their stories. And you've put together a PR kind of personal publicity boot camp, haven't you? A sort of online course.
Yes.
What's that about?
So the reason I came up with that was more from an education standpoint, to educate people that wanted to get a sort of in-depth, or at least some insight into how PR works and the benefits of PR. So more so than telling people how to actually get their own PR, because most people won't be able to do it themselves anyway. And also, we already have the established relationships with publications and so on. So I think it's important for people to understand that it's much easier to invest in a publicist or PR company than to do it yourself. Because again, if I went to a magazine or a publication and I said, "Will you put me in?" it comes across as narcissistic, and the majority of the time they won't do it unless it's maybe potentially a good story. But all the people that are that are featured in publications or whatever, most of them are using PR or publicists. So the idea behind the boot camp really is to create an education-based insight into the benefits of PR and how it works, because I think there's a serious misunderstanding, and also there's a part of it that is, people think, oh, if I've been in one publication, I'm suddenly going to become a millionaire, or my business is just going to explode. And it doesn't work like that. It's all PR, all publications are all building blocks to to expanding and growing your brand and your story.
It seems to be that there's this kind of common theme that everything is done incrementally. If you want to get somewhere, if you want to achieve a goal,
yes,
the goal can be daunting, like launching a platform, to a LinkedIn for creatives, if you like. That seems quite daunting. But
yes,
registering a business is quite straightforward. Registering a domain is quite straightforward. And
yes,
you do it. There was a quote I heard, I forget who it was that said it, but it's basically, the secret of life is failing at bigger and bigger challenges. You fail at something until you succeed, and then you move on to something harder, and you fail at that, you get better, and then you beat that challenge, and then you move on to the next thing. And I feel like it's the same with that. It's not just about writing one article, but it's about becoming recognized, and it's about being over here but also over there, and it's becoming almost like building a reputation for yourself in your desired sphere.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also, touching on what we spoke about earlier, is the diversification, because we all know what happened with Facebook and IG, whatever that was or wasn't, who knows. But if you lean too much into one thing or two platforms and you solely rely on that, it's very dangerous, in my opinion. So I think that it's important for people to diversify in onto other platforms, and I think that's what PR does. So obviously, a lot of print publications have now gone digital. Some of them don't print anymore. But even so, whether you're in Harper's or whether you're on Fast Company or whatever, at the end of the day, it's creating a different platform, and they're not owned by the same company. So it's not like there's going to be this threat that, everything's going to collapse or you're going to lose a ton of money, or whatever the case is.
I mean, you were referencing the outage, the Facebook and Instagram outage, and those two channels are kind of widely seen as the big. If you want to get in front of people's eyeballs, you kind of either go to Facebook or to Instagram. And but with those two going out for however long it was, it just kind of showed how vulnerable those two marketing
Yeah,
channels are. So you need to create something that is not reliant on, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. You've got to
yeah,
be a bit
absolutely.
more dynamic than that and get bigger than that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
And so that's what your boot camp is going to show people how to do.
Yes, exactly. So it's going to be a three module program, and it's 1 hour a week, and it touches on three different modules. So the information I can obviously send to you if people are interested. Um, but yeah, I mean, it covers, like also how your bio should be, and how we pitch and different ways, because people don't always realize it's not just about sending your bio. You actually have to go in with an angle, a pitch. So it's also about showing people that it's you're not going to be going on to like a TV show and talking about yourself. You may be asked to go on and speak about a specific subject that you are really is really niche. And I don't like the word expert, because nobody is an expert, because things are just forever evolving and changing. So I prefer to call people specialists than experts. But yeah, so it just gives some insight into into the different aspects of media and publicity, and how to prepare. And also, images are very important, because publications, as you know, before they would have budgets to do a photo shoot, but now these days they're actually asking people for their own images. They obviously credit the photographer involved, but it's not quite the same, because they just don't have the same level of budget they used to have. So there's a lot of
Yeah,
changes.
I
Yeah.
would say that's a biggie. If you're working in any professional sphere and you are likely to give interviews, having I mean, it may seem a bit egotistical to have these professional photographs done, but if
Mm.
the number of times, I mean, I spent 20 years working in magazines, and the number of times I ran an interview and I said to someone, "Have you got a nice headshot?" And they might send me a terrible holiday snap, and I'm like, I'm pulling my hair out, because I'm thinking, I need good photos. I can't run with this. You've given your expert
Yeah.
opinion on something, or your specialist opinion, and I just
Yeah.
can't run with you. A photo taken in your living room or something. It has to be, you have to represent
It
yourself
has to be
professionally.
professional. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
So
I think it's all these little incremental things that we'll be talking about, and what is required and what is needed. Um, yeah, and just give some people insight into how PR and publicity works.
so if people want to find out more about that, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Um, so they can either email me, which is Kerrin, Kerrin, at talentfinders.com, or they can get hold of me on my IG, which is, well, they've got it as Black Kerrin, on Instagram, or I'm on Facebook, which is obviously just Kerrin Black. Yeah, so those would probably be the best ways to contact or connect with me.
Fantastic. And of course, there's talentfinders.com if anybody wants to sign up to that as well.
Yes,
But yeah,
absolutely.
that's brilliant. I feel like that's quite a far-reaching conversation we've just had. So I'm ever so grateful. And yeah, I think there's a lot to be learned about facing your fears and understanding yourself. Know
Yes,
yourself, know when you're going to feel like you're going to run out of steam, know when you're going to lose the kind of will to keep going, and preempt
yeah,
that. Don't expect things to just happen, but you have to kind of know yourself, know what you're aiming for, and build to it.
absolutely. And I also think that touches on mental health, and I think it's very important from a mental health standpoint, especially in it's become more evident now through the pandemic. How it's really affected and impacted people. So yeah, I think it's very important to address those things, and also to take time out when you feel like things are getting too much, and really just take some time for self-care, whether that's going for a walk, or taking an hour nap, or doing something that is just going to help you to calm. Because I think there is I don't know, I almost feel like there's a social anxiety that's come about through this pandemic where people are finding it kind of challenging to reintegrate back into society. And it is strange because a lot of people have been out of social circles or networking events or concerts, or so it is challenging for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think, if you feel like it's weird, it's probably because it is weird. So it's a very it's a very strange time we're going through, and to be expected to pretend it's normal, I think, is not a healthy perspective on things.
It's not.
So yeah, definitely, and also when you're building, I mean, I know running this podcast, sometimes it can feel like it just never ends, but there's always this push to kind of be consistent and keep delivering. But sometimes you do have to just say, well, hang on a minute, I'm a bit tired now, I need to rest for a few days. But yeah, no, well, I'm really grateful for your expertise or your specialist input. I don't want to use that word expert now.
Thank you.
But your specialist input, and I think there's plenty of different things there that we can take away in terms of just facing, taking ownership of our state, taking ownership of our story, facing the fear of being authentic and putting it out there, and using that as a medium for sharing our message. So I really appreciate that. Thanks for that.
Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you.
So there you go, that was me chatting with Kerrin Black about the power of our stories. You may recognise Kerrin from the early days of this podcast. She was a guest a whole 55 episodes ago. That seems like a whole lifetime ago. Another repeat visitor is Krish Srikumar. He is a games developer, a meditator and a deep thinker, and he'll be joining me in 3 episodes' time to pick up on this idea of stories and how powerful they can be. I'm really looking forward to that one, and I hope you are too. In the meantime, don't forget to join the conversation at our Facebook group and find more episodes at conversationsonliving.com. Next week, I'll be chatting with author, speaker and thought leader Sue Stone about how we can step up to meet life and bring with us the kind of energy and attitude that will transform our reality for the better. But until then, have a lovely day.